Hey, welcome back to This Is Horror.
Oh my God. I never want to leave, guys. I just want to stay here. Like, put me in some like folder, on your hard drive desktop, and I'll just stick around. You can
That's
just
an
dust me off whenever you want. Be like, was Clay still in our in our cache file or something?
that is an interesting and terrifying concept, kind of that there's something techno horror about it, just capturing a person and putting them in your cache. And it's a little bit relevant to what we were talking about off air because we were
Hmm?
daring to dive into the murky waters of AI. So
Oh
there's
God.
there's something to it, capturing people, putting them in your folder.
Do you think? I mean, the things that we're afraid of right now with AI, do you think it's going to be the same things that we're afraid of AI like a year from now, 6 months from now? I feel like I remember being at a convention or like on a panel at something speaking specifically about AI in like maybe 2023, 2022. And like there was still this kind of like, what about AI? And people are like, oh, but now I just can't even imagine. I mean, now it just feels so ubiquitous. It's so everywhere that I don't even want to imagine where it's going to be a year from now.
Guess, I mean, it begs the question, what are we most afraid of with AI, to be
Hmm.
able to fully answer that? And then what do we think people in general are afraid of? I think in terms of creativity and writing specifically, there is a fear of it taking people's jobs or people kind of accepting that as an alternative to real, soulful human fiction. For me, I think that AI won't it won't replace the demand for real authored books. And
Yeah.
I guess about a year ago, I felt even stronger about that. It's like, look, it will potentially replace what we might call, and I've got to think, how can I phrase this properly? But the kind of more repetitive jobs, or the,
Hmm.
the the less creative jobs, I suppose, like transcribing things or inputting data, things of that nature. But I don't know. We have seen very, very recently, in fact, AI narrators
Hmm.
narrating audiobooks. And I noticed, because I have one of my audiobooks and soon to be two on Find Away Voices. They were like Find Away Voices and Spotify, and now accepting, AI narrators. Now, at the moment, my narrator is going through the book for my forthcoming release, Daddy's Boy. I'd like to exclusively say that I didn't think, okay, well, you're fired. Let's bring AI in. So he still has a job, but I could see there being a worrying trend, for audiobook narrators, that they're going to be not replaced, but people will have them as an alternative. There will be some people who will replace it, particularly as the technology gets better. So that would be a concern for me if I
Yeah.
was narrating audiobooks.
Yeah. All the voices that are on your hard drive. You can just kind of like you could just bank all of your author friends and like capture their voices and just put them in a folder file and then just have the like, I'm gonna pull out Paul Tremblay today, or I wonder what Alma Katsu sounds like right now. Like have
Well,
them feed their
if
voices through text. It just
if you
sounds so, oh God.
if
I'm
you
already kind of like,
decided, yeah, if you decided to pull out Paul Tremblay, that would be the wrong author to try and rip off, because he very quickly and very vocally, rallied, rightly
yeah.
so, against AI. So you better believe you're getting a lawsuit if you try and pull Paul Tremblay's
Yeah.
books, not books, voice to narrate your books. But yeah, didn't something happen in Hollywood way before people were panicking about AI. I think maybe 5 years ago now. I can't remember which actor, but I'm pretty sure there was somebody who licensed their likeness for kind of
Oh, yeah.
almost deep fake style things. They got paid a ton of money.
Yeah.
Um, so the seeds were already planted at that point.
Yeah. And then we get Chuck Tingle's Bury Your Gaze, which I feel like speaks specifically to that. For me, thinking in terms of Hollywood, how recently um, with the film The Brutalist, with, oh my God, am I blanking on the actor's name? He just won Best Actor.
Adrian Brody.
Adrian Brody. There was a kind of minor little dust up of drama where apparently there was lines spoken in a different language, different accent, different mother tongue, and they utilized AI to kind of they applied audible AI to his ADR so that it sounded more authentic to the dialect that he was performing. So all of a sudden, it's almost like a performance enhancer, rendition of AI, which you know people started kind of debating. Well, that's not really him doing it, and here he is, being nominated for Best Actor, and does that somehow negate what he like his services? He's offering up his talents, and yet he still needs this kind of like extra boost to kind of seal the deal. And I don't know, like it's when it's the kind of like the kind of sanding down the edges, the sharper edges of something, so that it feels more homogenous or more kind of like whatever you're intending and hoping for. um I don't know, like, and that, like, that probably did not involve him at all. Like, that was something that happened, like, months after his performance was captured on film. So, is he even aware of what's being done to him? And the same can be said with CGI and, any other kind of form of special effect. But it just seems like more and more, like, they're kind of implementing these different kinds of technologies to make it like an Uber performance. I don't know.
Mhm.
I find it pretty terrifying, to be honest.
Yeah, it's like who would realize, other than the people who spoke the language,
Yeah.
that maybe the dialect wasn't right or something like that. And here's the thing: I get it. I totally understand that. That when it comes to foreign languages, that we should get the dialect correct.
Hmm.
We should hone in on a precision there. But at the same time, this is something like you're saying that probably happened post production.
Yeah.
That Brody could have just easily said, "Well, golly, guys, just tell me, and I could get a coach, and we can work it out." It's, I mean, it's like you just,
Yeah.
that they have voice coaches,
It
dialect
is.
coaches, you know.
Yeah. I guess if it's the pursuit of authenticity or like exactitude, um, I mean, I don't know. I feel like this is not a new point I'm making here, but I just find it's interesting how these technologies are kind of seeping into uh, uh, other kind of forms or mediums, and whether you as the artist are kind of aware, like if you're the actor, like, are you aware of what they've done, and do you have any kind of recourse for, like, pushing back on that? And I imagine once you sign your name on the dotted line, like, they can do whatever the heck they want with you, your likeness, your avatar, you name it, your voice. It's all up for grabs.
Yeah, I think the whole AI discussion is incredibly nuanced, and it's something I'm always a little bit reluctant to get into because we're so kind of at the beginning of this journey
Hmm.
that I of course I have the right to change my mind. What I think today may be different tomorrow when presented with new evidence, but it also depends how we define AI, because there's an argument that having the spell check and the grammar check on Microsoft Word is a low level form of AI.
Yeah.
A low level form of AI that I would recommend people use as a guide or a suggestion rather than a god, let's say, because the amount of times that it gets things wrong, it's so frustrating. It's like, did you mean to put a comma here? And usually the answer is either yes, I did, or no, I bloody didn't. Don't insert it. It's the opposite of what they want me to do. It's like, are you sure about the repetition of this word? Yes. It's poetry, motherfucker.
Yeah.
If you weren't a machine, you might know that.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, isn't that the catch where it's like, I think the antidote to AI is always going to be the kind of rough around the edges rawness that comes with text that doesn't make it correct. It makes it real. That it makes it you. And I feel that, like, the handcrafted box with all of its kind of cracks and imperfections, I don't know, like, I'm finding more art in the imperfection these days than anything else. Like, I striving for exactitude just has never been something that I've been really proficient at. So I almost am retreating in the other direction, and I'm a lot more raw and maybe a little less polished, much to my editor's chagrin.
I mean, this is something that came up when we were talking to Chuck Palahniuk, that he doesn't really fear AI or see it as a threat because, the error, the deliberate error, the deliberate mistake, that is a feature rather than a bug. That is what will distinguish real art from this machine interpretation of art.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, this reminds me of something I saw with Paul Tremblay again. He's come up again, and this was absolutely years ago. I don't even know if Paul listens or watches, if he'll remember, but there was somebody who was kind of calling Paul out for some comparative language, and they were like, "Oh, you used a simile here, but actually, technically, you should have used a metaphor. You should have used as instead
Oh,
of
wow.
like." And pretty much the answer was like, I deliberately made that choice,
Wow.
because I think this is a thing we have with creative writing and with fiction. And to go back to comma placement as well, sometimes we are putting the comma in for the rhythm of the piece. It's not
Yeah.
technically correct, but sometimes you gotta say, fuck the Chicago Manual of Style. This is
Yeah.
my poetry. This is how I want it to sound. And sometimes as well, like I'll find that with comparative language, even if as though might be the grammatically better choice, like it just sounds pacier. It just has that rhythm. So I think it goes back to this idea that many people have said over the years, where it's like, right, know the rules so that you can break them, then
Yeah.
deliberately choose when you're going to break them.
Yes. As someone who feels as if I have failed many an English class and languished in grammar and kind of never kind of excelled much beyond, further than kind of a remedial kind of an understanding of high school, maybe middle school grammar. Like, I've been kind of told by family members that, like, learning disabilities be genetic? That seems untrue to me. But, like, that we come from a family of, you know, dyslexics, and like it's something that like kind of runs rampant through my particular bloodline. And whether that's true or not, if that's even scientifically feasible or not, I don't know. But like it is amazing how my side of the family has kind of embraced this idea that we're not learned people. We're more intuitive, more emotive, and we take what we've got, which might not be the most, but we make the most of it. And I've always been so terrible at like proper grammar, and like I'm like in my head now, I'm like hearing every English teacher who's always kind of taken me to task for like, that's, I'm the king of gerunds, apparently. Like I just love like my like starting sentences off with ings. And but I feel as if one, if not me, but like someone, like an artist, an author, a writer, a painter, like you take your kind of shortcomings, you find the limit of your own capacity, your intellectual capacity, your artistic capacity, and you make that is your voice. Like that is you use what you've got, right? And for me, it's like I feel like it's very limited, but I'm just trying to utilize it to like the extent that I can. And that just is a long-winded way of saying like I'm awful at grammar, and I'm awful at like I still like to this day get my theirs and theirs wrong. And I just God bless copy editors who can catch the kind of mistakes, but like I think I've baked in my own kind of lack of grammatical correctness, and that's become kind of whatever you could kind of construe as like my authorial voice, I guess.
We never paid attention in school. That's the problem was,
Yeah.
I never thought that I would ever have to use a grammar tree. And we learned that, we basically like a grammar diagram where you show the subject and the verb and all of that. And they're showing us that stuff in school, and I'm like, I'm never going to use this. I'm never going to use this ever, which was the total lie. And I have my old college grammar because yes, I did take grammar in college. Because I started wising up, going, I think I might need to know some of this shit, and it was still hard. I probably made a C. So, but even going through that book and reading about how to not write passive, it took some little thing I saw online about how not to write passive that ended it after years of being, hey, this is passive, this is passive, this is passive. If word going, did you realize you have a passive statement here? It's like, really? I never would have thought that because the other 50 in front of it were fucking passive as well. So, but I learned it off one little thing off the internet, and now it's like, hey, now I know what passive looks like. It's just one little trick, But studying that stuff and learning it and reading about it, you can't put it in any type of practical application. So no wonder we didn't care about it. We didn't give a shit about it because it was going to be on a test.
But I also feel like people don't talk the way
this is like, true.
Like, I mean, proof. Like, here's the proof in the pudding. Like, I've like been speaking in nothing but broken, fragmented sentences, and like, there's no grammar to this. Like, this is just complete. Like, I'm everywhere, and I don't know. Like, I find, at least with the stuff that I'm trying to write, not, and a lot of the stuff I like to write, I love to write in first person, but that idea of text kind of mimicking voice, narrative voice, like first person voice, and having a kind of heightened sense of vernacular or having your own kind of authorial grammar that's different than like, I don't know, when you're reading third person, like you want to feel like there's a certain kind of efficiency to the text that feels like you're in the hands of someone, you're in the hands of a Paul Tremblay. But I don't know, when it's first person, I just feel like it's so much more fun to talk like, to talk like people.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And I've got a couple of points at the moment, and I'm trying to segue them into one, but my brain is battling which comes out my mouth first. But I will say, actually, you said that you write more intuitively, and I imagine there's something liberating about that, because you're saying, right, I reject the rules of grammar. I'm just not even going to think about that. Whereas, quite often while I'm writing, there may be a little voice that will be like, it's not grammatically correct. It's like, yeah, yeah, fuck off. I know. Shut up. Get out my head. But then the other point is actually in my reading, I would say, when particularly dialogue, and this comes from editing others, really doesn't work. It's when, rather than mimicking reality, the writer is trying to be too grammatically correct.
Uh-huh.
And then that's the same thing with the first person. If you were to have it sound more like writing
Mm-hmm.
rather than just a person telling you the story, it's not going to be as engaging.
Mm-hmm.
When there's a really good first person voice, I almost forget that I'm reading, even though I am reading, but it's like somebody is telling me the story. I've become immersed. I've become trapped in the story, but in a good way, not like me trapping you in the cache of my computer.
Yeah, I'm just suddenly having like a Holden Caulfield moment of just like thinking of voices, narrators who have captured me as a reader. And of course, Catcher in the Rye. But Poe, and Poe, I mean, like, this is elevated text. So it's not like talking like we're from this, like, it doesn't have like a kind of patois of like, this is the way we speak in South Philly, or this is like, like it's not even exactitude of vernacular as much as it is just like, I don't know, like it just feels so inherently authorial, like it's that author, that though, like whoever these characters are, they're being manifested through the voice of these writers. And like you know as elevated as Poe can be, and kind of wordy and dense, like, I go for that ride. I take that protagonist's hand, that narrator's hand, and they guide you through that story. And it's so seductive. Um, I don't know. I don't know. I'm all over the place. But yeah, like that's AI to Holden Caulfield. There you go.
I mean, you need to have some personality for the narrator to really come through. I think actually the problem with too much exactitude, if that is indeed the correct word, that's quite a $10 word to throw out there this early into the podcast. But I do think the problem is it becomes colder. It almost becomes more like AI. But I'm trying to think, as you were talking, who are the authors that really just bring me into a story, or what are the stories? And immediately for me, Joe R. Lansdale comes to mind.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just such a delightful voice that will seduce you into the story. Then you've got Caroline Kepnes, particularly
Yeah.
with the You series. That is such an infect. There's such a delightful voice. I keep mispronouncing that. If you, I, I, I just think that there's something just so, yeah, again, wonderfully seductive about it. And most of the things that Chuck Palahniuk does, again, you've got that voice. I particularly like the UK writers Will Carver and John Niven, and it's all because they're injecting character into the narrative, into the delivery of the
Yeah.
story itself. So I I guess that, I almost like this imperfect delivery much better than just like, here is a grandiose piece that is completely grammatically correct. And it's like, yeah, but it's got no soul.
Yeah.
It's cold.
Yeah. No, it's funny how like injecting a little bit of personality into your text, which seems like an obvious thing to say, but like I don't know. I don't know if I'm thinking of the authors that really embrace it and really kind of sing and but don't necessarily call attention to themselves. Um, I was thinking of like Stephen Graham Jones. Like I'm always kind of amazed. I feel like Stephen Graham Jones and Joe R. Lansdale like have a kind of kinship of like they spin a yarn in a way that the whether it's third person or first person, like you always get the sense that like there's a storyteller behind the words themselves. That like you could almost close your eyes and like imagine even in third person like there is a layer of narrative like a narrator who is in between the author and the reader, and like it's like an added kind of like I don't know layering of personality that maybe feels a little homespun. Like it feels like they're spinning a yarn, Joel Lansdale for sure. But like, I think Stephen Graham Jones does it maybe perhaps a little bit more subtly. And I feel like I kind of became aware of it, like hearing him talk at a live event where I'm like, oh my God, he's talking the way that he writes, which is this added, like, he's just like, like I see him at his desk, like working on the computer, and I'm just hearing him kind of like say the story as it's, being transcribed onto the page. Like it just feels like there's like an Occam's razor of like, his mouth to whatever's on the page. And I don't know. I just love that. I love it.
Yeah. Have you ever read Demon Theory?
How do you get it?
Well, it's hard to get. And I think that's one of the ones that might be coming back, but
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
that would
there's a
be,
re-release very soon.
yeah. But it's listening to the first time I ever heard Stephen talk, I had already read Demon Theory.
Mm-hmm.
And so he basically talks like you read Demon Theory.
Hmm.
You've got this text, but then at the bottom of the page, and literally every page, there's a footnote, some of which is not real at all. It's all just made up stuff. But that's how Stephen talks, because he'll say something. It's like, yeah, and he was in this other movie that came out in 1974 that was really, really good too, and it had a lot of slasher stuff, and that was kind of groundbreaking. And then he'll go back into the story, and you're like going, wow, we just got a footnote like in the middle of a conversation, and you want to take fucking notes, right? Because it's like it's good. But an author that actually comes to mind who can do what you're talking about in third person and not make himself known for it's Laird Barron. Laird has this ability to write this prose in third person that has a personality of its own.
Yeah.
And you're talking usually it's there's subtle changes, but typically it's extremely educated person who has a spice of language. And I love it because you'll get like the most, scientifically correct sentence. And it's like, and if they don't like that, he'll throw in an F-bomb in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And you're like, is this first person? No, this is third person. And I'm like, okay, I want to write like this.
Yeah.
This is cool.
Yeah. I love I mean, I think this is why I come back to the same authors over and over again. It's because I love feeling or vibing with the personality of the author and having that baked into the prose. Like that's somehow imbued into the text, even if it's not like, hi, I'm Stephen Graham Jones, or I'm Laird Barron, and I'm the narrator of the story, so here we go. But like you feel them almost to this extent that like I've never put this to the test, and I want to believe I could perhaps do this, but like, what if you were to do like a blind taste test, like a blind reading where you took a Laird Barron story, a Stephen Graham Jones story, a Caroline Kepnes story, and like you put them side by side, back to back, and you had no idea who wrote what. It was a story that you'd never read of theirs before. And could you be like, oh, that's totally Stephen Graham Jones? Without even knowing, like, it wouldn't be like, all right, one of these stories is a Stephen Graham Jones story, and one of these stories is a Laird Barron story. Like, you would have to like the guessing game would be like, taste this. What is it? Who did this? Like, what is this? Like, and could you vibe on the author? I wanna try this.
I think you've just created a game for some sort of horror convention
Oh
or
my god.
festival. And the two festivals that immediately spring to mind where I could imagine maybe the organizers will go for this are Brian Keene's Scares That Care and
Yeah.
Max Booth and Laurie Michel's Ghoulish. This is the kind of thing they might just go for. But I love it, this taste test. And I mean, you could have, if you turned it into like, I don't know, a 30-minute long or maybe longer actual proper game show, you could have like kind of round one is the easy one where it's like, right, one of these is a Josh Malerman, one of these is an
Yeah.
Anya Alborn, one is a Sarah Langan, one is the John Langan.
Yeah.
You have to match, but then it gets progressively harder. It's like, maybe it's like there are 5 stories. One is a Paul Tremblay. That's all we're giving you. And then, by the end, you've just got, there are 10
Yeah.
stories, no names. You've
That would
got to
be
get them.
Yeah.
it would be fun, and like it would be tough because it would be, of course, like, you know, horror readers are very well versed, and particularly in their authors that they love. So you may be hard pressed to like come to the table with like a story that the audience hasn't necessarily read from a particular author. But like, now that you mentioned Josh Malerman, and like I feel as if I could intuit a Malerman story without necessarily knowing for sure if this was like, if you blind taste tested me on Josh Malerman, I think there's like a pluckiness to his prose that it always feels very nimble and light on its feet, and yet deeply traumatizing. And in intellect, like he's positing these like kind of concepts that are always like mind blowing, but he does them so kind of nimbly. Like I feel like I want to believe if you tried me on a Malerman story, I'd be like, that's Malerman. That I could feel it.
Mm-mm.
I think for the taste test too, it would depend. Are we getting an extract or are we getting a full story? If we're getting a full
Ooh.
story, this is a much longer game.
Yeah.
Is it
I think it would have to be
impractical?
little
Yeah.
samples, little tastes, little nibbles,
Yeah.
Yeah.
With a full
But
story,
but
you would probably be able to discern who it is. Yeah.
Malamon would
I
be
think so.
easier with a full story, but if you don't get the full story, the thing about Malamon is he does at times have a distinct mode, but then he will surprise you by introducing a new mode, a new part of his repertoire that you didn't even know he had.
Yeah.
So if you throw in a kind of classic Malaman in more the kind of Bird Box vein, you're probably going to get it. But if you throw in one like he did in Spinner Black Yarn. I'm forgetting the name, but this like almost Russian literature
Yeah.
parody. I
He's
don't know
he
if you're gonna get that one.
Yeah. I mean, he was definitely playing with form a lot more in that one. To this day, Half of This House is Haunted. That story is genius. Like, I love that story. I think it's a brilliant story. He has mastered this form of like taking an idea, taking a concept, and exploring it to its infinite degree in a way that kind of, I don't know, like it just shows you the dimensions of the possibilities of something, a thought or an idea, and all of its I don't know, like all of its traumas. Like it's always like, I don't know. I love his stuff. I love his stuff. I'm a fan of Josh Mallerman. It's so strange. Like it is this like I'm like every time there's something new from him, it's like a celebration because I don't know what it's gonna be, and I don't know what it's gonna do to me, but it's gonna do something to me, and I don't know. That's very rare, but it's so
Yeah.
plucky. He's so plucky. I
He
think.
has the ability to take a concept and put characters to it, and it's all organic, and it becomes a story, and the stakes keep going higher and higher and higher because he explores all angles of the concept.
Yeah.
You look at incidents around the house, I don't think he left any stone unturned.
Oh my god.
But as he flipped over each stone, that created new complications and increased the stakes, and it's all done organically. And that's powerful. Very,
Yeah.
very, very powerful. You capture that in a bottle, you sell it for $1 million.
I love that book. So Bob, you're the only one who's going to Ghoulish Fest, so you have to do the blind taste test at the Ghoulish Festival.
Foolishly, I have signed up for a panel that even Max doesn't know what the panel's about.
As in, like, they haven't decided yet, or they're just
No,
keeping it a
that
secret?
was the actual selling point of it. Is don't be a coward. So
Wow.
I had to sign up, and I have no idea. I'm sure that they have something in mind, and it's probably going to be dastardly.
Um,
but I don't know. I don't know. I'm
of
scared.
all the conventions and festivals, I'm really sad I haven't been able to go to Ghoulish. Like that one just looks cool, you know? Like everybody has a little bit of that FOMO when it's like, oh, what's going on over there? And I see like whenever there's a Ghoulish, because this is the third year?
Fourth.
Good Lord.
And we don't know if it's going to happen again.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in San Antonio, but the main thing is it's in Texas, and some of the writing community just for obvious reasons do not feel safe traveling in Texas.
Yeah.
And it's sad that we've gotten to this point.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna be quiet because I can derail this whole fucking thing. So I'm just.
I mean, I'm a relentless optimist that when we go through dark moments, whether in life, whether on a kind of grander global scale, that there will be light moments coming in the future. There will be brightness. I think I have to believe that to, be able to deal with the darkness. So I would certainly hope that, this isn't the end for the Ghoulish Festival. This isn't the end for Texas. There will be better times around the corner. It might take a while, might take 4 years, but I think better times will be coming.
I do believe that. I just we'll have to go through some bad shit. We're gonna have to Andy Dufresne this stuff. We have to go through a tunnel of shit, but we'll be able to see red on the other side.
We really shouldn't have to, you know. So
I'll
many
take,
good people who don't deserve it.
Yeah.
I I'll take your optimism, because I feel like it's getting harder and harder to manifest it myself. So at least some of us are still accentuating the positive.
I'm doing my best.
And that's going to be sad for a lot of people to hear, Clay, because I mean, I think outwardly and by reputation, a lot of people will see you and also Josh Malaman, who we mentioned, as possibly the two most optimistic people in the genre. But of course, we're certainly not naive enough to believe that, you're always optimistic, that there are never difficult days. That isn't reality. Although as I'm saying that, you as a person, very optimistic, but goodness, if we look at wake up and open your eyes, that's an indicator that things are not all rosy, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the dichotomy, right? Like I'm keeping the in-person public facing side optimistic and positive. Not optimistic, just keeping it positive, and saving the bleak stuff for the writing itself. But like I think the key difference there is that like I've been really fortunate to have been working with publishers that feel comfortable like sending me on the road, and touring, being out in the public and being in person and doing events with people and having people show up like that. Like honestly, particularly in this last year, the value of actually meeting readers and meeting booksellers and meeting librarians and like actually like putting a face to a digital virtual avatar, like it feels like such a genuine gift to have the ability to like meet people, and that genuinely makes me happy. Like I am at my happiest as an author when I have the ability to kind of engage with readers. The writing is painful as all get out, but you know the you know and it's not always a given with authors wanting to even like go out, and I think we're all kind of introverts, or however, wherever you fall kind of on the spectrum. I just know that for me personally, I just derive great joy out of meeting people and sharing that, because it blows my mind that anyone would go out for any book event. Like that, like people still, brave, whatever weather to go to the bookstore to like meet an author whose book they've read or want to read. And if I'm lucky to be that author, or even be the reader going to see an author, like there's just something so genuinely like intimate to that like I don't know. That's it's community building in the sense that like everyone like I feel like online like people like talk about the horror community. Like for me, I understand that they're like on a virtual level, like it's there, but like for me, I really genuinely see the community when there are events and like the people who come out, and I just love that. So that's, me at my sunniest is just when I get to be around people who want to read spooky books, and then I just write the bleak stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of people within the community who we are generally really kind of positive, happy people. There's like a bit of bounce to our personality, but then we're exorcising the demons, as it were. We're leaving that for the page, and I think there's something tremendously healthy about that.
Yeah.
It occurs to me that we've been speaking for 45 minutes and I haven't asked a single question. And that's just because it's so kind of free flowing and organic and just interesting. So, this is a very unconventional podcast for people, but I think, there's beauty in that. But something I would ask, at the start of the interview, and I think it's quite relevant to what we're talking about here, is so it's been just over a year since we last had you on the show. You spoke about not being optimistic about some things. So, I mean, what have been the highlights for the year? What have been your biggest struggles, both personally and professionally? What are you optimistic about? What are you not optimistic about? It's year in review time with Clay.
Wow. Oh my God. Are we talking just the year in general? Like the kind of like State of the Union with like, are we talking me personally, like my kind of ups and downs, or just like the way that I'm viewing the landscape?
I think we want the personal
Okay.
Clay's
Oh
personal
man.
life, Clay's professional life,
All
Clay's
right.
writing life.
um, well, we last talked about, it was What Kind of Mother?
Yes.
And I mean, which is so wild because like, if that was over a year ago, I was working on Wake Up and Open Your Eyes, which I mean, it's just, it's always interesting when you're like kind of thinking like, you know, again, this is a privileged existence in publishing, but like you know, for 5 books now at Quirk, I've been able to, be working on the next one while promoting whatever the present one is. And when What Kind of Mother was out, first out, I was like still digging in to Wake Up, and like, you know, it's it's difficult to talk about that book in particular, Wake Up and Open Your Eyes, because it's so kind of adhered to the political landscape, and I don't know what else am I going to say about that. Like it's that book has brought me nothing but anxiety, and it's been really uh it's been difficult to kind of like ferry that one through, shepherd it through, um, to the extent that like I live in an echo chamber of self-doubt when it comes to that book. I think I'm hearing myself say this, and I feel like I've probably said something similar to every other subsequent book that's come before it. But but with Wake Up, I really mean it. I genuinely, like, this is like a genuine kind of like any, all of the kind of good, the bad, it all kind of exists in this weird kind of like din of anxiety of how the world is taking that book, because the world itself is changing, and the more things change, the more they stay the same. But like, I feel like the volume has kind of cranked itself up to such an extent that like, had I known where we would be in March of 2025, when I started writing this book in 2023, I would almost kind of second guess or doubt like Is this the right choice? Is this the book I really want to be putting out there in the world? But I've been really fortunate to like have had an opportunity to kind of do a lot of work and tell a lot of stories that I've been like really dying to tell. I got early in 2024, I got a little novelette out, like a little thin edition called Stay on the Line. And that was with Shortwave Books. It had illustrations by Trevor Henderson, and that was like a true joy. I had this novella called Kill Your Darling with Bad Handbooks. I got to work on a creator-owned comic series that I had been really, like trying really hard to get out there. And that was called Seance in the Asylum. And that was with Dark Horse. And that was kind of all prelude to 2025, where Wake Up and Open Your Eyes came out back in January. And that's kind of, that has been the year of like, particular map points writerly wise. And yeah, I mean, it's been intense because all of these stories are very personal in their own kind of personal in their own personal way. And yeah, yeah, I don't know if I have any grander point other than just like, I've just been so friggin' lucky to have the faith of these particular publishers and the ability to kind of get these stories out there, because I don't know, I just don't want to take that for granted.
Do you think that some of the anxiety related to putting Wake Up and Open Your Eyes into the world was because it is the most overtly political book that you put out? There's no question about where you stand. I mean, anybody
Yeah.
who followed you or spoke with you would, at the very least, have an inkling as to your political persuasion. But this is very in your face and confrontational about it. And
Yeah.
as you said, I mean, at the moment, particularly in America, but also globally, it is such a politically turbulent time. It is a time where it feels like we haven't been this divided. There's not much middle ground.
Yeah, I I feel like I would try to add the caveat that the book is almost an equal opportunity offender, that it's like it doesn't, it attempts to uh take everyone to task. It is just a more compelling aperture into the story to start with the right. The conservative, like for me, conservative news, 24-hour news networks are such low hanging fruit that it's just the obvious choice, because it's the immediate, it's like the kind of like we all presume like, oh, let's just poke fun at the, Republicans, or poke fun of the, right wing, like that. And the book does that. But it starts there, and it kind of, I think, evolves into something else. Which is to say, we're all fucked, and like it, like no one gets out alive. And whether readers have the patience to see that through, or if it's just so, I think I have come to learn that like I lose a lot of people very early in the book, because you know it is an experience that it's not subtle. It is quite dunderheaded in its politicking, but that's all by design. I mean, I'll be frank and say that like I don't think, for those readers who want something a little bit more astute with their kind of political criticisms, like this is not the book for that. This is because when I look out the window, or I read the newspaper, or I turn on the TV, I am personally not seeing the astute kind of acute analysis of like where we are. Like I see the world kind of burning, and choices made off of belief systems and things that are a lot more rash and vulgar and profane. And I just wanted a book that kind of embodied that like, I mean, there are far more intelligent writers out there who have done it, with a scalpel and, critiqued like the American political system to such an extent that like it feels like, you've just been operated on by a virtuoso doctor, but I'm here with a ball peen hammer and I'm just like, dun, 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 and that's because I will be bold and say that I think that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, as I was reading it, it certainly brought to mind, particularly as it progressed, John Carpenter's They Live. I mean, I felt,
Yeah.
how can you not have that kind of
Yeah.
comparison as the whole world is falling apart and
I,
you
oh, I love They Live. I mean, They Live is beautiful because it's like, it's this populist. I mean, it's pop culture. It's like sci-fi with WWF. Like it stars Rowdy Roddy Piper, for Christ's sakes. Like it's like it. You can't get more bubblegum than that. I came here to, like, what is it? Chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum. Like there is political messaging within that movie for sure, but it is wrapped in the gaudiest, uh, veneer. And it's like, that was, I mean, I believe that was a major studio release. I can't remember who distributed it, but like that's a movie that went wide into cineplexes everywhere. And that was like taking down Reagan, 80s America. Like, and I'm just like, how amazing is it that this movie goes out into the world, and whether everybody picks up on its messaging or not, it seems pretty blatant and pretty, like, and but it was fun, and had a 15-minute wrestling match in the middle of it all, and like that's glorious, like glorious. Ah, I love They Live.
Yeah. And had some of the best lines ever, Without these, you look fine. Put these on, formaldehyde face. I'm like, that's total John Carpenter right there.
Oh God. But it's Rowdy Roddy Piper doing his like best John Wayne. And
Yeah.
so like there's such a cognitive dissonance there, but I love it. I love it.
And then Keith, and of course Keith David, who just, just goddamn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, I wanna, I don't have any examples of this, so this could be a faulty theory, but like post They Live, I'm trying to think of any major studio release or pop, like what within pop culture was that kind of blatant in its messaging that you would watch it and be like, oh, I mean, Get Out, maybe,
Handmaid's Tale.
Handmaid's Tale. When did the book, that was 88?
Yeah, the book came out. I mean, and I think we're at the fifth or sixth final season. I've never watched it.
Oh, the TV series?
Yeah. And so, but I've also never read the book. So,
I mean, oh my
probably
God.
should fix that.
It's terrifying. It's terrifying. That's one of those books that you read it now and you're just like, this was written yesterday. Like, this is about today. And it doesn't matter if it was 40, 50 years ago now. It's it's still it rings true. That's resonance, man.
Mm-hmm.
So, in terms of wake up and open your eyes, we've given some people some ideas as to the thematic concerns, but what we haven't done and what might be helpful now is if you could give the people who haven't read it the elevator pitch. What is Wake Up and Open Your Eyes about?
I mean, it's funny. I kind of take a global view on the pitch, and I usually say, imagine, if you will, that half of the country is possessed by demons. And which half just totally depends on where you get your news from. Is it 24-hour news networks? Is it social media? Is it even YouTube? Is it Baby Shark? But yeah, it's the kind of insidious insinuation of the demonic by way of our screens and our information. That's my very broad pitch on it all.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because you were saying before how perhaps at face value it seems like it's a critique on right wing politics, but actually, yeah, there is the view that it's critiquing left wing politics if you're to look at the kind of evils of social media. So that's one view. The other is the kind of evils of facts news, as they are called in the stories. So
Mhm.
can't be sued for that one. So it's kind of. Would it be apolitical, or do we have to say it's uber political because there's politics in every fucking dimension?
I mean, it's been really interesting to hear kind of people, like the feedback that I've gotten from readers for the book. And, I I I don't think of the book as being a real astute kind of like criticism on politics or culture at large. But I do think of it, for me, as this kind of existential wail for 400 pages of just how terrifying it is, to be a part of a country, a culture that has schismed in terms of its realities, that like you can live next door to someone but exist in two separate realities based on where you get your information from. And I have had, the whole kind of impetus behind writing the book was because I have family who have, over the course of, say, like the last 10 years, kind of shifted in their ideologies by way of where they get their news from. And it's been really kind of, it's just really terrifying to like watch, to kind of bear witness to someone who kind of started on this end of the spectrum, or maybe didn't even start there, but like existed to whatever extent, on one side, and then just gradually kind of like shift over to the other. And I don't know, like that kind of loss of identity that goes along with it, to the point of like it feeling like radicalization. And you know I saw that happen with my family. I've seen that. I've, heard that repeated by other people and their family members. But that common refrain of like, I didn't recognize my uncle, my grandfather, my mother, my son. Like, it was like they were possessed. And I just thought, like, oh wow, that's such an interesting thought. We're using it as a metaphor, but like, has anyone just done that literally? Has anyone done the kind of literal minded version of that? Which is such an obvious, like, the as far as concepts go, it is so so like paper thin. But I think that's the vehicle. Like, these concepts, like, they just don't have to be heady or weighed down by the tonnage of intellect. Like, it could just be like, yeah, half the country is just possessed by demons. Like, that's all it is. And you know the mileage that comes out of that is massive, because I don't know, we're just at a place where, like, truth doesn't matter anymore, facts don't matter anymore, details don't matter anymore. Like, it's all kind of like blended into this kind of like morass of belief systems, and it's I'm kind of getting bored of myself saying it, because I just feel like this is not new. Like, we as a culture, we as a country here in the States have just been constantly kind of yelling at each other, and that kind of level of despair has only kind of like intensified, and just the kind of like the yeah so the right, like, kind of taking the right to task was my way in to this story. But I just wanted to, like, speak of, like, how wellness culture radicalizes its viewers, how Twitter radicalizes people, how social media, how Baby Shark, how, like, kids videos are in effect kind of radicalizing children. And these are all things that have been here for years, and I just wanted to yoke them all together, because we're hitting this zenith point where, like, all of this kind of like gradual decaying way of our own kind of morality or our ethics or our social contracts, uh it's all coming to a head. It's already come to a head, and now we're kind of in this post aftermath of it. And I think we're going to just keep seeing the kind of the aftershocks of it. So yeah, this book came out at the absolute worst time, because it's the absolute best time.
Yeah, exactly. It was interesting. In fact, I mean, particularly if you look at the publication date, or was it January the 7th? For goodness sake, this
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
It. I mean, it's a strange one, because it somehow is more relevant now, and was more relevant when it came out than when you were writing it.
Yeah.
You just didn't realize it, and you probably hoped to hell that it wouldn't be.
Yeah. I mean, I've said it before, but it's like I started writing it in 2023, and I was responding to uh, Donald Trump's first time in office, and specifically with January 6th. Like, January 6th was really the kind of the riots at the Capitol. Regardless of what you think of that moment, that day, like, I watched footage of it, like, just the kind of the kind of static, no edit, just like nothing but just kind of raw footage. And I just find something so traumatizing of that day, of just like the kind of like the sheer wave of humanity approaching that building, breaking into that building, consuming that building, and then dissipating. And I just, and I don't want to speak hyperbole, but I do think that, like, there's just something really just kind of mortifying about, like, I do feel like that was really, like, I remember, like, just being so kind of affected by it that, I didn't see, it's been hard for me to kind of see beyond January 6th in a lot of ways. Like, I've like that day in particular, just for some reason, for me particularly, specifically, like, it I just found it very kind of like damaging. And I wasn't there. Like, I was just, I mean, it was just like, I wasn't a bystander. I wasn't like, I just watched it from home. And I don't know. I've never been a part of a civil war. I've never been a part of, like, uh, a culture clash. But like seeing that and just the kind of like the amount of determination to just plow through any barrier, to push through any barricade, and like it, you know, it just seemed, I mean, we've seen so many zombie movies, we've seen so many kind of fictional horror movie narratives that like have that image of like, I mean, World War Z, where it's like, you know, just like mounds of bodies just like consuming buildings, and and you can watch it and you can say to yourself like, oh wow, that's really scary. But like seeing January 6th, I could I you know, I'm it's almost like putting the, it's like reversing the cart and the horse, or you know, like, you know, it's no longer the metaphor of, you know, the monster. It's the kind of the thing that was underneath the metaphor, without the zombie, without the kind of veneer of a Halloween mask. It was just people, and they were like they were attacking this building, and like that, I don't know. I should shut up now because I've just been mouthing off. But like, yeah, that's where it started. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna write this book. And then I thought that by November 4th, 5th, 6th, we would be in a different world, where there would have been a different outcome. And the book had originally been scheduled to come out in October of 2024, and due to circumstances, the book had to be pushed back to January 7th. They were actually going to put it out on January 1st for a moment there, and you know, through a lot of kind of discussion, I wanted it to go back to October, but they said they would be willing to push it back to January 7th, which in retrospect, thinking specifically about January 6th, it was an ideal, like, cheeky time to release the book. But yeah, after Election Day, I thought that the world at large would not want to be reading these narratives, like reading a book like this, like that we would be in a country, in a world where we would have our first female president, and books or culture or art or anything that kind of like focused on this kind of chapter in our lives, people wouldn't want to engage with it because we're looking through the front, like through the windshield. We're not looking in the rear view mirror. Like we don't want to look behind anymore. We want to look ahead. And I was really bummed because I thought this book was just going to disappear because nobody would want to read it. And then the election happened, and the outcome was different than the one that I had kind of expected and hoped for. And all of a sudden I was just like, oh no, no, this book is coming out now in this world. And what's that going to be like? And like, I have just been clenching and chewing my nails ever since.
I want to say that I think that, you know, because I've seen a lot of the raw footage myself, and I don't want to harp on this, but I don't think people realize how close we were to literally losing it.
Mm-hmm.
We were, if the end result of that attack would have culminated in the goal, which seemed to go around a gallows. At that point, right there, if I would have witnessed that on TV, I said, "We're fucking done."
Yeah,
And that did not happen is a testament to good people trying to do the right things.
yeah. I mean, I mean, for me, it was just the like, you have two opposing forces. You have a body of people, just multitudes of people pushing against these barriers, pushing against these doors and these windows. And then on the other side, you have a much smaller number of people who are doing everything in their power to just hold those barriers up. And like that kind of tension point of two opposing forces of humanity, like basically just clashing with one another, and then one side just pulling back because like there's just too much. There's just too many. And for the fact that like once they're inside the building, it kind of fizzles at a certain point. It just kind of dissipates into random body chaos and anarchy. It just doesn't, like, there's no kind of end result. That's just like, it's just them, being vulgar.
It's like there was no organization. Once they it was like once they hit that goal, it was kind of like, well, we're here.
Yeah.
Just got the beer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, but I mean, at the same time, I shudder to think about what would have, if there would have been there he or she is.
Yeah.
Get them.
Yeah.
That to me, that would have been the scariest shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you acknowledge that the sentiment is there, the need, the desire for it is there. What wasn't there was the structure, the kind of like, okay, we're here and now let's do this. Like there wasn't forward.
There was no organization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, like now we're just kind of spitballing here, but like if that were ever to happen again, I feel as if people might be a little bit more prepared. So I don't know.
Right. But I also think the opposition would be just as prepared.
I applaud your optimism. Is that optimism? I don't know.
I don't think it would be a good outcome for anybody. But,
I don't think it's gonna be. I don't think it's gonna be good. Yeah. I don't think the outcome's gonna be good for anybody now.
No.
But we're just living day by day. We're in real time right now. Whatever happens now has never happened before.
Yeah.
And like we're constantly living in the now in this way where like before you could be dissatisfied and frustrated with all of these systems, but the systems remained. But now these systems are collapsing and like things just happen.
Yeah.
They happen at such a kind of exponential rate that it's like, I don't know what's happening right now. Nobody knows what's happening right now.
What's happening?
Yeah. Which is
But,
terrifying.
we were talking about, if there would have been a different outcome, if you think about it, it would have been probably the beginning of the end of the horror renaissance.
Hmm.
So, hey, at least we got more horror.
Yeah. Oh God.
Yeah. Maybe change the name of the podcast to This is Happy Horror. This is Happy Horror.
This is happiness.
Cozy horror.
Yeah. I don't know if I agree with it, but like that idea that horror does better in more conservative eras of presidency.
It's kind of what history shows, but
yeah. It seems so crass to think that like it breaks down like in terms of commercial publishing that like that's the case. But yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of American Rapture by C.J. Lead, which was a phenomenal book. Even something like Fever House by Keith Rawson.
Oh yeah.
These books that like, I mean, American Rapture is defiantly political in its own way, but like, I don't know. Like, I think that who knows what's going to happen now, right? Like there's going to be a whole nother crop of books that might kind of speak to this kind of illness.
I mean, one thing that Ternana Reeve said on her fantastic podcast with her husband, Stephen Barnes, life writing is that, during these moments of great political despair, let's say, it's really important to kind of do what you can, but to not be so consumed by like the kind of grief and the negativity that you get lost to it. You do what you can, but try not to fixate on what you can't do. Everyone should listen to their podcast because she would have put it much better than me. But I think, that there's a great message to be had there, because if we do get consumed by things that are out of our control. I mean, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be angry. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't be pissed off about it, but we don't want to, I guess, be paralyzed and to be powerless because of what's happening that's out of our control.
Yeah.
People need to listen to that podcast, Life Writing. This is the first time we've mentioned it on This Is Horror, but so
Tenerife
good.
is great because I feel like I go back to the Reformatory so much, where just the notion of the situation that she puts her characters in, and if I were to either be in that book or if I were to try to write that book, I would have no hope. I would not be able to find the hope, either as someone within the story or someone crafting the story. But Tananarive does both, where even in the face of a hopeless situation, her characters find hope, or always striving towards hope. And as the writer of that story, she imbues her text with a sense of hope that, as dire as things are, I, as the reader, never despaired. Like, I felt like I was in like adept hands, like a master craftsman's hands, where I was terrified and like I feared for these characters' lives, but like I never gave up hope on them. And I think that takes such a rarity, and when you see it done, it's kind of revelatory. It's pretty mind blowing.
I mean, The Reformatory is not just one of the best books that was released the year it was released, which I think was 2023. It was either 2023 or 2022. But I think it's one of the best books of the last 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
And I mean, one of the best books, not one of the best horror books. Of course, it is, because it's in that subset, but it is just one of the best books of the last few decades, I think. And I hope, and it deserves to go down as a classic,
Yeah.
to be remembered for years, to be remembered indefinitely. And it should be, because there are a lot of lessons to be learned.
Yeah. Yeah. It truly does. She wrote it it took 7 years for her to write it. And I those were 7 years well spent. Cause if that's what comes out the other end, then hot damn, there's a lesson there to learn.
Oh, yeah. Yes. And I mean, you said with writing Wake Up and Open Your Eyes that it was not an enjoyable experience. It was anxiety inducing, it was difficult, it was not a fun time. Yeah, you said your
Yeah.
fun time is kind of meeting up with fans, doing the book events,
Yeah.
networking with the authors. Is it that do you always not enjoy writing, or was it specifically for this book? And if you do always have a difficult relationship with the writing process, was it amplified for this one in particular?
Yeah, it was certainly amplified. I mean, it's funny because like each book kind of has its own driving emotion behind it. Like I'll write a book and I'll have this feeling of like this book is coming from a place of love, or I'm writing this book from a place of panic, and like I wrote What Kind of Mother, oddly enough, from a place of love, and you know, each book like I just have to kind of like it's odd, but it's just like, where am I going to write this book? Where is this book coming from? And some books, I just want to have fun. Like I'm going to write this book, and it's going to be fun. That doesn't mean every day is fun, but like the kind of joy, like the imbuing that kind of like, this is the prevailing emotion for me. And with Wake Up and Open Your Eyes, it was honestly like just coming from a place where like I had no answers. I didn't know what answers I was looking for. I didn't have a compass, and I didn't have a lot of hope, and I didn't have uh it was just it was something more active than just despair. Despair feels kind of inactive to me, like it feels like it's like negating some kind of momentum. I mean, it was literally just like screaming. I just felt like I was screaming onto the page for you know for months. um which can't be an enjoyable reading experience, but so it goes. That was like, I just despaired vocally with words. 400 pages.
I think it's an addictive and a compulsive reading experience. It's interesting. Would I call it enjoyable? I would say that there was never a point where I didn't want to keep turning the pages. Let's put it like this. It is a very bloody good book. I feel like I felt what I was meant to feel. There there was anxiety, there was disbelief. There wasn't a lot of comedy. Although the ghost shark song did make me laugh that you decided to go there.
Yeah.
The comedy that was there was, the kind of bleakest, or the comedy of despair, of aghastness, which I don't think is a word, but I think people understand what I'm going for. There was it.
Yeah.
The book is a ride.
Yeah.
It is a roller coaster. Um, how how
Yeah,
did
I mean,
as well as there being something of They Live, there was almost something of Magnolia, specifically the Tom
wow.
Cruise kind of
Wow.
Tony Robbins
Nobody
incel.
has nobody has called out Magnolia. That's amazing. I love that. God, I
Yeah.
love that. Um I mean, yeah, that prismatic narrative quality of just like watching all these separate threads, these storylines. Uh I love that. God, that movie is amazing. Has never ever come up before now. Maybe that's because not many people have actually seen Magnolia, or not nearly enough. Um, Gotta love that Paul Thomas Anderson.
Mhm.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And yeah, for some reason, even though I'm a voracious reader, a lot of my comps are normally movies, or a lot when I'm kind of comparing things. And
Yeah.
yeah, just Magnolia absolutely came to mind.
Uh, Now I want to see that movie again. It's been a while. Um, yeah. Oh, I love that movie. Yeah, this is the alt-right MAGA horror zombie demonic possession epidemic pandemic rendition of Magnolia.
It's
Magnolia.
Yeah.
That's
Magnolia.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
know,
man.
the thing, the probably the first comp that came to mind for me was Evil Dead, and not Sam Raimi's
Oh,
Evil
really?
Dead, but Alvarez's Evil
Wow.
Dead.
Wow.
Yeah, so not Ash versus Evil Dead.
Yeah.
They're a little bit more serious,
Yeah.
you know, and that's because and something about, I guess, the just, the whole repeating that, his dad just continuously repeating, and then the concept of what he does to stop him, and it's like,
Yeah.
that's so Evil Dead.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because, like we were talking earlier, the whole premise is very, if you try to dissect the premise of it, it's flimsy. It's like, but so is the Evil Dead. As soon as you start to dissect the Evil Dead, it falls apart. It's like none of the shit should work, but it
Yeah.
does beautifully.
I mean, I absolutely bow down to the altar of Raimi, and Evil Dead 2 is a pivotal text as far as I'm concerned.
Mhm.
And I absolutely not even riffed, just like ripped off Evil Dead 2. For me, what I find so funny about the Evil Dead series, like the original 3 and then the 2 remakes, I was so against the remakes. I was just resistant to them from the moment I heard that they were doing it. And I watched the first remake, the Alvarez one, and I was like, okay, it was interesting enough, and it was doing, it was a remake, and it was kind of like paying homage to the forebears, but like doing its own thing enough to feel like, okay, this is the kind of like maximalist version of something that was already a maximalist version. Like how do you top something that is so over the top to begin with? And I'm glad they didn't go cheeky like in the, part 2, but they kept it to just the original Evil Dead. But then when I saw Evil Dead Rise, which had to have come out in 2023. It was either 2022 or 2023. But like seeing Evil Dead Rise, I was like, oh, I can do this. Like I can write Wake Up and Open Your Eyes, because what I feel like gets lost in the conversation about any of the Evil Dead movies is just how nihilistic they are. Like they could be humorous as all hell, but there is just never any hope. Like if you are in this movie, you are going, unless you're Ash, you are going to succumb to demonic possession. Like it's just inevitable.
In the worst way possible.
There's no hope. There's no hope in those movies.
Right.
And even at their cheekiest, like you're just done. And that is the one thing I think the sequels, the reboots and the remakes do better, where it's just like, these are the most nihilistic horror movies because you're just fucked. You're just screwed.
You're fucked even if you're the final girl.
Yeah.
You walk away from that, you're fucked for life. You're fucked up so bad.
Yeah. No hope in those movies. No hope. But it's so fun.
Yes. That's probably why they're so fun, is because there's no hope. You don't have any boundaries.
Yeah.
And to me, that's like, and that's one of the things I like about the Evil Dead, because the lore, there's not much lore. They have wiki pages. I know, I've seen them, but there's not much lore. And if you pull one piece out of it, it's like that little puzzle game that it just falls out. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
But it's that energy that none of this should work, works.
Yeah.
It's that energy that makes it work. It's crazy. It's just fucking crazy.
Love it. But yeah, I totally ripped them off. Like that was like, Evil Dead 2 in particular. I was just like, oh, let's just go to town. Like, I had that constantly in mind writing this book. Like, what would Raimi do? That was kind of the motif. It was like, that was the kind of like question I would ask. What would, your mom's possessed. What would Raimi do? Your dad's possessed. What would Raimi do? There's a blender in the house. What would Raimi do?
Yeah. The whole, and you're right. Also, Drag Me to Hell.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, I see it's
Yeah.
now that it's mentioned, it's like I'm just waiting to come to. There you go.
Love it.
Yeah. So, I mean, you had reluctance in terms of, what the feedback would be to this novel, what the critical acclaim, what the reader reaction would be.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we're a couple of months into it now. How are you finding that? And I mean, do you look at your reviews a lot? Do you engage with, negative as well as positive reactions? By engage, I don't mean start replying to them,
Yeah.
but, are you receptive to that? Are you reading what's being said?
Oh, absolutely. I'm reading everything. If it's out there, I have to read it. And that is not the healthiest choice, but it's the choice I'm making. If I was made of sterner stuff, I would not do that. And there's a part of me that wishes I wouldn't do that, but I do it because I'm weak. And, I'm always like, oh, someone's writing something about me. So I'm going to read it. And I'll be like, oh, they didn't like it. Oh, and that's, the positive way to spin it is that I'm always trying to learn something about these books. Like you put these books out into the world, and then the world tells you what they think. And for me to be a better writer, I'm always like, how can I kind of take feedback and process it so that I can be mindful of it to whatever extent I choose to be when I start working on the next book. And I think one could argue that going to Goodreads for that kind of education is probably not the best. But I guess I'm just looking for kind of a consensus of like, if you hear the same kind of refrain over the course of several reviews, then it's like, oh, I hear that now because, and for better or for worse, the book is very vulgar, and the book makes some choices that a lot of readers are finding off-putting, which, I would be honest and say that's kind of the point. And feeling like we needed to kind of hit the ground running so that you would understand that, like, in terms of the possessed and who is possessed and who is possessing, that these are, our bodies are not temples, and they're just puppets or playthings or toys for whatever these forces are, and they're just gonna tear us to shreds. They're just gonna run us right into the ground because they don't care. I don't think demons care about the condition of our bodies. It's like, once they're in, I don't think they're like, oh, we should probably be mindful of our vessel because we want to make sure we leave them in the condition that we found them. It just doesn't strike me as being demonically authentic. So yeah. But I do find that with reader reviews, what's really interesting for me is that, every book kind of has a ripple. Like I think of it as like there's like a lake. It's a smooth lake, smooth surface, and the book is like the rock, the pebble that you toss into the lake. And then the ripple effect of it is how you gauge how far the book reaches. And like the initial ripple is usually like, you know, advanced readers, friends, friendly reads. And like that's your kind of initial like, okay, well, what do these people think of the book? And that's usually when things are at their warmest and your Goodreads rating average kind of stays close to, somewhere between 4 and 5. And then like there's like every subsequent ripple. And for me, the challenge is always to break out of that first ripple. Like you want to get to the next ripple or to the next ripple after that. Like the second and third ripple are not your friends, not your family, not people who read yours. Like those are the people that you don't know and don't owe you anything. And you can kind of see like how far it goes based on, the fact that it's not personal to them anymore. And like the book is, reaching people that don't know you from Adam. And like that's when the kind of tenor of the review also changes into something maybe a little bit less beholden to goodwill and like, kindness. Because people just be like, oh, this sucks, I hated it. And you'll be like, oh, that's a bummer. But each their own. And I it's so funny because like I had this moment where a book talker, like who had like a lot of followers, like I've never had a book, like a book of mine get like embraced by a book talker who was like anyone, like, but there was this one who was like, I really like this book. And because this one book talker has like however hundreds of, like 100,000s of viewers, followers, it led to an additional ripple that like I've never really had before. And those people do not care one iota about, like me, the book, like it, like it's just like it is a dimension of feedback that like solely exists because of some, like a tastemaker or a gatekeeper saying, I like this, I think you should read it. So it's like gone, like it's orbiting far beyond me. Well, not really far. Like it's not a bestseller. It's not like, I'm not at that level, but like it has extended beyond my own kind of personal scope. And that's wild. But with that comes a whole new realm of like uh, attention or feedback it's very new. It's very new to me.
Yeah, I think I probably know the book talker that you're talking about because I had a little look at, the wake up and open your eyes Goodreads page just to see what are people saying as well. Because I'm always intrigued as to other people's perception. And then there was one person I noticed had left a very brief review, and I was like, wait a minute, that person has a lot of followers
Mhm.
on TikTok, and there's people just being like, right, well, if you liked it, that's good enough for me. I'm buying it, and
Yeah.
you can't pay for that kind of press. And if
Yeah.
people ask you to pay for it, then you should refuse them. But yeah,
But isn't it wild that like, there are, this is such a stoner epiphany, but like people have amassed a following of hundreds of thousands of hundreds of thousands, 100,000s of, like of people who are like, I trust your opinion on books. And it's because you make compelling videos or you have great pictures. And it's like, they've created this identity, this personality, this brand. And like they are a guided like a trusted source of like information. And like that is, I mean, that blows my mind. That like, and my kind of jaundiced kind of view of it was like, oh, it's probably because they just picked the safe books, like the books that everybody likes, and like, they're not rocking the boat, and like, they might have a controversial opinion every so often, but it feels safe to kind of say like, oh, hey, I just read this new, Stephen King book, and wow, and it's like, and like everybody like plays along. But like for this one particular book talker to have said such positive things about Wake Up and Open Your Eyes, I feel like that was a risk. Like to whatever extent, like this feels like whatever the stakes are, like it's not a book that, it's a very polarizing book, and like the people who like it, but the people who don't do not. And for someone else to be like, I really like this book, I think you should read it. Well, now she's putting herself at stake, like at risk, for saying that she endorsed this book. And like, and like, I did a moment of like doing a little bit of a deep dive of like just looking at the comments and seeing like how people were responding. And like some people were like, oh, I hated this book. And I was like, I felt a little guilty because I was like, oh my gosh, here's this book talker who's saying nice things about my book and telling people that they should read it. But now her followers are debating her, or getting, or disagreeing with her, or getting mad at her for saying like, you should read this book, when they didn't like it. And it's just like, it just makes you realize the kind of like the complexities of social media book reviews, which is insane.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I wanted to ask too, what does it look like in terms of your writing versus your promotion, and how much are you actively doing to promote things? You, of course, go on the book tours,
Mm-hmm.
but do you leave a lot of the promotion, the marketing, and the advertising to your publisher? Do you do things kind of going out of your way to come up with some mad idea, or do you take their guidance? And then what does a day look like in terms of like how you're splitting your attention between the writing and the promotion? Because I find it really interesting when I ask this question of authors, just how wildly it varies.
Yeah.
There's one author, well, Jason Pargin, because he's been very vocal about it. He probably spends about 80% of his time now doing things in the realms of promotion and 20% to writing. Whereas you've got someone like David Moody, who is much more weighted towards the writing. And
Mm-hmm.
it's something I've been experimenting with myself. And, I don't necessarily know what the balance is. What I do know is that I feel a lot more joy when I'm writing and a lot less joy when I'm just kind of like promoting.
Yeah.
Being on a podcast or a YouTube channel, I very much enjoy that. But if I'm kind of sending out emails trying to get somebody to bite, will you give me a review? Will this happen? Could this happen? I think it's because it's so unknown.
Yeah.
You could send out 100 emails and you might only get a few replies. So sometimes it just feels like you're just eating something that isn't particularly nutritious or healthy. You're atrophying.
Yeah.
And, I want to have a steak dinner with some nice fresh vegetables, which is the equivalent, or if you're vegan, you substitute whatever a kind of nice tofu steak is. I don't know. I'm not vegan, but writing is good for my soul and it brings me joy.
Yeah.
But as well as joy, it's nice to have money and it's nice to
Yeah.
have people knowing about the book. So what is this balance looking like for you?
I mean, well, my the cornerstone to the day has to be the writing. So like I'm waking up early and spending first half of the day, like up till like, before the sun rises to like lunchtime is like just, that's the unfettered writing time, because that tends to be when the phone isn't going off as much as later on in the day. And then like around 11 o'clock to lunchtime, like that's when kind of like the more kind of promotional stuff starts. And like, I'm compartmentalized where it's like, I know I can get most of my writing done at this chunk of the day when nobody else needs me. And then when other people wake up and are kind of going about their day, that's when I can start kind of like doing the song and dance of look at me, look at me. PR, like, I feel like I'm trying to figure it out and learn just as much as anybody else, because I don't necessarily believe anybody truly knows how how it works, other than when it does, we can all point to it and be like, well, that seemed to have worked for that author. I do know that it costs money. Like, my publisher has been willing to take me out on the road and like, get me a hotel room here and pay for my gas to go there. And, but like for Wake Up, it was a much more kind of truncated experience. Where with What Kind of Mother, they were like, go, go, go. Like they wanted to really take me out there on the road. And I think probably was met with like mixed results. Like, like I don't know what the metric is in terms of like, we send you out here and therefore we need to get this return. Like, I don't know what metric kind of like strikes a balance between like, we spend X amount of taking you out and we need Y amount to make sense of it all. But I do know that for me personally, the more honest and the more kind of like personable I can be with my own kind of promotion, it seems to resonate more than an ad campaign or something that feels kind of like packaged. If I just make a stupid video where I'm just like, this is who I am, and this is, and there are people who are much more savvy about it and have made like cottage industries on videos and TikToks. But for me, it's just like, I'm just gonna like, if I can just do this and speak from the heart, it doesn't always land, but it feels like that's more sincere and therefore people appreciate it more. I don't know. And that to me is the only thing I can be responsible for. Like, I can't, like, you can throw that rock in the water and like maybe it'll ripple 2 or 3 times, but that might be it. And I don't know, like, you always just want these books to kind of find their readers. It doesn't have to be for everybody, but it just has to be for the people who want it, like it. And you just have to find them. And that's hard. It's so hard.
And I wonder too, I mean, along those lines, if you are willing to speak about it, it would be interesting to know a little bit about what the marketing input from the publisher looked like for Wake Up and Open Your Eyes
Yeah.
compared to Doug at Bad Hand Book with Kill Your Darlings,
Yeah.
Darling, and then Stay on the Line with Alan at Shortwave. What was the comparative experience, or what were the kind of things that they were doing as opposed to what you were doing to try and make each of these books as much of a success as possible?
I mean, it's tough because like, I mean, okay, Shortwave and Alan and Stay on the Line. Like, Shortwave is just really Alan. I know he's brought on other people to kind of help, but like, that is as close to a one-man band. I mean, so same with Bad Hand. Like, when you recognize and realize that like these companies are usually one or two, if at most three people who just believe so much in the stories that they're publishing and getting out there, like there's no money in it. Like PR for Shortwave and Bad Hand is just Alan and just Doug just post like please, like there is no PR budget. And I feel like what someone like Doug is building off of is kind of name recognition, or I feel crass saying it, but kind of a brand recognition, where like if you have a Bad Hand book coming out, you're essentially kind of guaranteed a certain caliber of story from a certain particular author, and you could be inclined to pick up a Bad Hand book because it's from Bad Hand, just as much as who the author is. Or you'd be at least willing to take a shot. You'd be like, "Oh, I like Bad Hand. Like I read Speck of Dark. Like let's check this out." So, but like it is just morning, noon, and night, Doug or Alan posting or trying to get people to pay attention to it. But like what's phenomenal is like Stay on the Line got reviewed by the New York Times, and we didn't ask for that. We like it never entered into my mind that Gabino Iglesias would put Stay on the Line in his review roundup for the New York Times book review section. Like that just, I mean, and this is not a knock to Alan or Shortwave, but they are so small and so independent that like you just never like that just doesn't happen. And I actually don't know how it happened, other than Gabino asked for a copy and read it and reviewed it. And like that's just like, what? Like it was, so maybe the thing that is being that I'm intuiting here is that like it's like at a certain point, if you put in the legwork and the time, that like outlets or PR sources or review sites like suddenly kind of like pay attention to either the author, the publisher, or on these kind of micro independent levels, because if they're putting out work that like kind of merits their attention, they'll say so. They'll do something. Where with Quirk and Wake Up and Open Your Eyes, they're kind of a mid-level, mid-tier, independent, medium-sized publishing company with major, big five distribution. And it was a constant conversation of like, how are we going to package and promote this book, which is polarizing and is going to effectively rock the boat for anyone who picks it up, for better or for worse. So the conversations of like, they like, you get a marketing plan when you're working with someone like a publisher like Quirk, and they're going to tell you like, we're going to, hit these people up. We're going to go to these, we're going to, do some sort of book campaigns, and there's a plan, there's like a plan in place, and that requires money, which folks like Bad Hand and Shortwave just don't have. And even at Quirk, it's not like, it's not big five money as much as it is just like, we have these limited resources and we're going to target who we think we can kind of best utilize these funds for. And but I think, and I don't want to get in trouble by saying it, but I think that everybody's just waiting for lightning to strike. That like no one knows for sure if any of this is ever going to work. And you can just hope that it does. And when it doesn't hit, you're just like, oh, okay. But if it does, you're like, what? Like, wow. Like, but at the end of the day, like, I don't think, unless you're a publisher who has the money to say, oh, this is the book that everyone's going to be reading next year. And then you just dump money onto that book being the book, which happens to certain select books. But like for us mere mortals, we're just like waiting for word of mouth to get, like, it's that ripple effect. You just have to get beyond, you have to get like 4 or 5 rings out, you know? Yeah.
So, on a similar note, we have a number of people who are listening who are kind of first time authors, or they've just wrote their first few books. If you're at the start of your career, you had a novel ready to go, you got different options. You can send it to a smaller publisher, you can send it to a larger publisher, you can send it to an agent, or you can independently publish it yourself. In what order would you kind of target these options? Are there any you absolutely wouldn't do? What would be your strategy?
Oh man. I'm a pretty meat and potatoes kind of guy, so I would do it in probably a traditional order of like agent first, and have the agent submit it to the larger houses. And then based on the feedback that you would get from the editors at those big houses, if they take it, great. And if not, then I would expand the kind of submission pool to smaller houses. And then based on that and what feedback you get from them, if there are no nibbles, I would then publish it myself. And that probably is what, a year, if not more, of your life right there, that you've gone from like seeking out an agent to seeking out a traditional publisher to seeking out a independent publisher to publishing it yourself. Like that's like a that's a long time. But I feel like that's the order I would do it in. But if there's a clock ticking and you like want if you want the book out tomorrow, then maybe reverse it and do your own, publish it yourself, and then see if you can kind of build a readership to then get the things like an agent or a contract with either a large or independent sized publisher. But yeah, I think that would be my guess.
So, in terms of trying to get an agent, at what point would you abandon that? Like, how many would you send the book out to? Or if you felt you're not getting enough bite, would you then target the smaller presses, or would you write another novel and try to get the agent with the second one? I think these are questions and things that people, can consider a lot, and they're things that people will ask me. And of course, we have the caveat always that your mileage may vary. So to claim McLeod Chapman answer, this
Yeah.
shouldn't be, the definitive answer for everyone. But
Yeah.
I think it is interesting to ponder.
I mean, I got my first agent. I didn't buy it, but I like sat in a Barnes and Noble with a copy of the writer's market, and I combed through that thing. I spent a whole afternoon just sitting on the floor with a notepad, just copying out all the addresses of agents who I thought might be interested in what I had to offer. And I think I got I sent out a story with a letter to 30 different agents. And 28 of them wrote back and said no. And one of them wrote back and said maybe. And one of them wrote back and said, yeah. And, or I want to read more. And, she said, I want to read 5 stories. And then she read those 5 stories and she was like, I want to read all of them. It was a process. So it wasn't like she said yes right away, but she was like kind of testing the waters a little bit more and more, dipping a toe in, dipping a foot in, dipping a leg in.
And you snail mailed though.
Oh yeah. I mean, this was like,
that's a point
the
that's
olden
important.
days. Yeah. This was 2000. So, I mean, I was a kid and I didn't know any better, honestly. Like I was so naive and so young and kind of wet behind the ears that, like, had I known how much of an uphill battle it would have been, but it was funny. Like I was just so naive that it worked. Like I kind of stumbled into my Cinderella story where, I got my agent because it's so funny because she was this agent. She still is this agent. She's not my agent anymore, but at the time, I don't know why I didn't realize this, but she had not represented any fiction authors for over 13 years. And I sent this letter out of the blue, and she was like, oh, this is charming. This guy clearly didn't read the breakdown clear enough. But she was like, you know what? I'm gonna give this guy a shot. like she literally was like, oh, silly boy. Like, let's see. She was like, I'm willing to give this a gamble. And it paid off. Like, she got me a 2-book deal with Disney. And it was, and she was like, oh, this is, I think I've got something here. So she started representing more fiction after that. So, and it was just kind of dumb luck that, like, I didn't read clearly enough to, like, know that she was not a fit, but she ended up being the one. She was my first agent. So, if your question is, how long do you go before you give up or do something different? I mean, like, I don't think none of these things kind of exist in a vacuum. Like, I think you can kind of do like a multiple, like, very different, like, different things at the same time, of like constantly like reaching out to agents and waiting for them. I would, in terms of writing the next book and putting this current novel down in order to write something new, in order to engage agents, I wouldn't do that unless I had been given specific feedback, editorial feedback, from an agent or from an editor who was like, this isn't ready, or this is not going to sell, or this is not going to, like, if you're hearing that and you're hearing it enough times from different people, then it might be wise to pivot to a new thing. And those books never go away. They're there and you can return to them. Kill Your Darling is actually really a good example of that. But yeah, like, I feel like stories don't die. You just might have a harder time or a longer road to hoe to get them into the right hands of the right people.
Yeah, and I definitely think, if one is querying with one book and then they switch to another, in my mind, it isn't that they would then abandon that original book. It's just like, well, maybe this isn't the one to reel in an
Yeah.
agent. I think with Josh Malaman, like, he was going to query a different book rather than Bird Box to begin with, but it was Bird Box that became the first book. So possibly a similar story with Chuck Palahniuk as well.
Isn't that
So
wild?
yeah, I think if we believe in our stories, then we absolutely shouldn't give up on them. But sometimes there is an awareness that a book might be a tougher sell. So I mean, my forthcoming book, Daddy's Boy, which from the title to begin with, you can tell maybe that this isn't the one that you send out to the most esteemed literary agents, and it's a dark comedy rather than being a comedic horror, which so like the emphasis is on the comedy
Yeah.
this time, and it's kind of known that in fiction, dark comedy is going to be a harder sell. So I've got the awareness. I had the awareness. This wasn't the one to reel in an agent. So I decided to independently put it out. I just thought, let's just see what happens. It's
Yeah.
completely an experiment. So I think thinking about, if you've got three novels, for example, you're in a very good position because you can think which is the one that might attract the agent. And often, if the agent likes what you've got, they'll be like, okay, well, what else do you have? Or what are you working on? And it's like, well, I've got this weird book about an estranged father son, and there's a lot of dick jokes in 75,000 words. Are you interested in that? No, Michael, we're not. Okay, well, don't worry. Here's another more traditional Japanese horror. So it just like throwing things out there and seeing what sticks. It's God, like you said before, it's an experiment. It's fun
Mhm.
and games. You never know what's gonna make it.
Yeah.
That's part of the fun, and for some people, part of the anxiety. It's like, what do you mean? It's fun.
The
I
absolute
don't
terror.
know what will happen with Daddy's Boy. It could absolutely tank, or it could tap into the dick joke zeitgeist, which is not something I thought I'd say on This Is Horror. Or, it cannot do well, and then in 10 years' time, Zach Galifianakis reads it, he talks about it, boom, there
Yeah.
you go.
It's amazing. Like, I just feel like we're all playing the kind of long game here. You just have to survive longer than anybody else. If you could just outlive everybody else,
Yeah.
that's all it takes. Easy peasy, right?
Yeah. But I don't want to be like 90 years old. My book I wrote 30 years ago is finally found its home.
I'd
You know?
rather be 90 and alive than be,
This is true. Yeah.
Edgar Allan Poe, and you
And
die not
41
knowing how bloody
good you were. Yeah.
good, important,
Yeah.
just such a part of the literary canon. So it's like, please, if you see value in what I'm doing, let me know before I'm dead.
Yes.
It's no good anymore when I'm dead.
But I mean, you got a book, Michael, that's polarizing. Clay's got a book that's polarizing. I think that right now, if you're doing polarizing stuff, that's where it's at. It really is, because you don't want to be that you don't want to be that middle ground right now. The middle ground isn't getting noticed. It's the stuff that people either love or hate. And if it's both things at one time, then that's I've bought a lot of books because someone said they couldn't stand it. I'm like, I've seen a lot of movies because someone said it sucked. I'm like, well, I want to see for myself.
There you go. Yeah, I think it's a good time just to take a stance,
Yeah.
rather than like going down the kind of straight, like the middle, like just take a stance.
You said that Kill Your Darling had an interesting journey and was very much a kind of long game. So I know
Yeah.
that we're coming to the time that we have together, but we got to talk at least a little bit about
Yeah.
this. So, I mean, let's talk about the journey from the initial idea to the publication.
I mean, the publication, like, it's wild because I honestly feel like Kill Your Darling should not be out. It's a book that, like, it wasn't that it was cursed, but like every step of the way, like it just felt like it was never gonna go. But I I don't know. Did I give up on it? I probably did give up on it. But like, so like in 2015, I wrote like a short story version of it, like 10 pages. And it never went anywhere. I don't know what I ever did with it. I don't think I did anything with it. Like, didn't send it out, didn't do anything. I am with a management company that like that does film and TV stuff and publishing stuff, and they're always looking for projects for either clients of their own or for and at that point uh Liam Neeson was really big with his Taken movies and like all the films that were basically like old actor who has reached the kind of not the end of their career, but like, it's the kind of autumn of their stardom. And it's like, how do you take a celebrity, like an action star, or not even an action star, just like an older actor, and give them something new to do? Like, how do you where are Liam Neeson action movies? And my manager at the time was like, you should write something for Liam Neeson. and it was kind of like, okay. And like, they were also kind of like, because Johnny Depp was getting a little old at that point. And they're like, maybe if it's not Liam Neeson, it's someone like Johnny Depp or Bruce Willis. And, you're just hearing all these names and it's just so abstract. And they're just like, this is not real. None of this is real. This seems so silly. But I found this newspaper article in the Times, and it was this father whose son had been brutally murdered, and it had been decades, it had been years since his passing, and there had not been, like, still no culprit had been brought, like, there was no justice. And it was basically just a profile on this man who kind of like refused to give up and kind of let go of his son. And it was really heartbreaking. And that just so happened to kind of dovetail into me teaching a creative writing workshop for adults. And there was this one guy in my workshop who was basically, he was old, 80s ish, older than me. I was probably in my early 30s, maybe late 20s. And this guy was a lot older than me by like decades, 50 years easy. And here I am, his workshop instructor, and I'm like trying to like, he came in with a story which was clearly not fiction. It was clearly him speaking just about his life. And this is a fiction writing workshop, and we're trying to like talk about dramatic structure and like, character work and narrative voice. And anytime anyone came at him with feedback, he'd be like, nope, that's not how it happened. And, he would just kind of shoot down any constructive criticism because he'd be like, nope, that's not the way it happened. So can't change it. And I was just like, I admired this man for the tenacity of like, he had a story to tell. It was his story. And he came to this workshop in order to tell it. And, it was hard. It was virtually impossible to work with him, but I really like respected him. And there was just something so kind of compelling about someone like just wanting to tell the story. They like one story. It's not that he was going to be a writer, a bestseller. This was the story that he wanted to tell. And it was his story. So like these two things, the confluence of like meeting this old man and reading this newspaper article, and it just like merged into one idea. And that was the kind of beginning of writing Kill Your Darling, which started as this short story. And then, nothing happened with it. And then fast forward to, I started working at Quirk. Quirk Books was publishing, like, I had a 2-book contract with them. And the first book was called The Remaking. And the second book was going to be like I pitched this idea. I was like, here's this idea, kill your darling. And they were like, oh, that sounds really cool. Like, and they gave me the kind of blessing to go with it, but like they wanted to read a treatment, like an outline of the thing before like giving me the full steam ahead. But I actually wrote the draft, like the first draft of it, which was like only 40-ish thousand words. And I was like, I sent it to them, and I don't know if they ever read it, but they read the outline of it, and they definitely read the outline of it. And in reading the outline of it, they realized that that's not the book that they wanted. And they kind of couched it in these friendly terms of like, we don't think this should be your next book with us. You should write something else for us. And so what I had, like what I hadn't anticipated was that they would want me to like write something else because I had written this thing already. And I was like, oh shit, I have to start all over again. And we pivoted, and I wrote this other novel for them, and it turned out fine. And that was all before COVID times. And but I had this thing that I had written, and nobody, like, Quirk didn't want it, like my editor didn't want it. I didn't know if she even read it, but like I had it. So I just like sat on it for like several years. So that, I mean, that was like 2019. And then 2023, there was an open submission call for novellas at another publisher, who I don't know if I should name them or not, so I'm not going to. I'm not like going to gossip, but like, like there was this publisher who was like, we're looking for novellas, send us your novellas. And I submitted it. I was like, I would love to work with these people. This would be amazing. I'm going to just give it a shot. I have it. Like, let's do it. And I think they got deluged with like submissions. I think there were like 700. There were like hundreds of submissions. And I don't pity the poor intern editor who had to read like all of these submissions, but like, when you do it virtually, like on Submittable or wherever, it's like you get to see the placement. You're like 200th in line, 50th in line. I kid you not, I finally made it to number one. Like there was like, I was like, there is one manuscript in front of me, and once they read that, they would get to mine. And I literally, no hyperbole here, I stayed at number one for over a year. And it was just one of these things where I was like, I would forget that it was there, and then like all of a sudden I'd be like, oh my God, like this thing is like, it's like purportedly at this place, like I gotta go check. And it would always be at number one for a year, over a year. And then finally I was in a social event, in a scenario where I was like there with some of the editors at this publishing house. And I was like, hey, you did this open call like 2 years ago now. And like, I think I've been number one for a while. And they were like, and they were very kind of like, they're very pleasant about it, but they're like, oh yeah, we stopped doing that a while ago. And like, they're like, the person who was in charge of it, like I think they left or something happened. And like, they just hadn't been reading them. And I was like, oh. And so they were like, oh, we'll read it. And then finally, like, however much long, like maybe it was like a month later, they were like, yeah, we're not going to do it. And it was like all of that. And like, that was 2023. And then like by 2024, Doug at Bad Hand is like, we should do something together. And Doug, God bless him, because like Doug, when he gets something in his mind, he's always really nice about it, but he's always like, you want to do something? You want to do something? You want to do something? And I had gotten a story in one of their anthologies. So we had kind of a shorthand conversation. Like we were talking amongst ourselves. And he was like, we should do something. And I mean, at that point, like I had nobody wanted this damn thing. And I just had no faith in it. And I was like, we'll figure something. I was basically like, yeah, we'll figure something out. And he's like, well, do you have anything for me to read now? And I was like, I mean, I was like, yeah, I have this thing. I'll send it to you as like a sample. I don't know why I was thinking in terms of like a writing sample, but genuinely for me, the idea was he would read this, he would get an idea for my vibe, and then he'd be like, and then we could kind of talk about what we wanted to work on together. And quite literally, he read it, and then the next day, he reached out and was like, I want to publish this. And like for something like that I wrote the story version of it in 2015 to then get it into Doug's hands, to then say he wants to publish it and then publish it in 2024. That's like almost 10 years of like just one book, kind of like one idea, one story, just flipping and flopping and floundering until it got in the right hands, which just happened to be the bad hand.
The bad hand became the good hand. And
how's that for a hook?
I mean, to me, this seems like the perfect book for bad hand books, because on one level, it's this kind of goodness, this murder investigation, almost this grief horror, this traumatic experience. And then on another level, there's almost the critique of the creative writing critique. It's such a thing that bad hand books would do, or Chuck Palahniuk would do. It's, the different layers. So it goes to show that sometimes you write something, there doesn't seem to be a publisher or audience yet, but it's because, well, the publisher that it's right for, that the universe has destined it for, they don't even exist yet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, God bless Doug. He gets an idea in his head and he just won't say no. Like he won't. And I genuinely owe it all to him. Like, because I feel like Bad Hand does do that weird blend of like genres. Like, is it crime? Is it horror? Like, I think the Laird Baron of it all is like a perfect kind of example of like how you can have this kind of hybrid idea of genre. And it doesn't fit as cleanly into any one area. And I don't know. I really appreciate that. Like at this point, I can't imagine Kill Your Darling being anywhere else other than Bad Hand. And he believes in the books he puts out. Like he genuinely it's just him, and he's just doing this out of the sheer love of doing it. And I know he has big ideas and hopes for the future, but like, to get there, it's on the foundation of these amazing books by these mind-blowing authors like Eric LaRocca and Laird and Cynthia Pelayo, and it's just it's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah, your book definitely fits with their vibe. I felt like it's kind of coming out of left field, but it feels like it was a blend of adaptation with 8mm.
Yes.
And it's just, if you're on the fence, if you're listening to this and you're on the fence about reading this book, it is an experience. It is bleak. Uh, it is, but there's comfort in the bleakness, I guess. Uh, it'll fuck you up. Let's just put it like that. It's Bob Pastorella's blurb. This book will fuck you up. It will linger in your mind, and that may not be a good thing, but it's a fucking great book.
I love adaptation. It is totally me copying adaptation. I like how do you take the kind of true crime version of adaptation where like the creative process unravels or unmoors the psychology of the writer themselves, or the kind of protagonist.
Yeah,
Yeah. I love that.
yeah.
I just
That's
wanted to write something honest too. Like this to me is, and because everybody said no about it until Doug, it allowed the book to kind of maintain a lot of its, I don't know, integrity, I guess. Like it maybe integrity, it's structural integrity. Not my integrity as much as like what you read is ultimately what it's always been. Like it didn't have a lot of revision or like this is probably the most undiluted thing I've ever created. And like just coming, like having like that ability to like this is a story that like this is the story I wanted to tell.
It is stark. It is upsetting. It is at times brutal. It really is an unflinching examination of trauma and grief. You know, almost to the point where this sounds like a silly thing to say, but it's so authentic, it's almost difficult to believe it didn't actually happen to you, that this isn't autobiography, but I mean, thank goodness it isn't.
Yeah. I mean, I have 2 sons, and every day they go out into this world there's just like this moment of just pure dread. Like whether it's, what level the dread is at kind of fluctuates day for day. And there's some days where it's really high and there's some days where it's really low. But like the world is such a scary place. And I'm very fortunate that I get to kind of like exorcise these fears in these books. And sometimes like it's very undiluted. Like, Kill Your Darling is basically, the worst stuff that I fear being put into one place when it comes to family. Ugh, awful.
Well, before we go, there is one thing I've got to follow up on. And so, of course, you spoke about you had this 2-book deal.
Yeah.
You presented Kill Your Darling. You thought that's the second book. They came back to you. Surprise. This isn't the second book. You've got to write another one. At that point, how long did you have to produce a second book? And to give people some context, did you have a second book? Did you have a second idea? Did you have half a book? What was going on at that point?
I mean, I usually have a kind of buckshot kind of mentality where I usually pitch anywhere from say like 3 to 5 to sometimes 10 different ideas. And like I've been very fortunate to work with editors who are appreciative of the kind of like collaborative process. Like for me it's very rare to be like, this is my next book. Like it's usually like, these are the ideas, these are the stories that fascinate me. Which one do you feel you jive with and vibe with the most? And when it came to Kill Your Darling, there was a moment where my editor was like, this sounds interesting. I want you to flesh it out so that we can read more. So she, like, I can't remember the exact number, but it had to be like 3 or 5 different ideas. And we led with Kill Your Darling, and what she discovered in me fleshing it out in the outline was that it wasn't a supernatural horror story. Like I think that like this really kind of carves its way into the kind of psychology of the main protagonist, but like the whether or not there is a ghost or a supernatural element, that's very subtle and very kind of like quiet, where I think my editor had assumed in the initial pitch that it would be more, that the supernatural elements would be more, and it just wasn't. So she was like, "Oh, that's not as good." so so but what we had were all the other story ideas that I had pitched in that initial kind of volley. So she was like, okay, we're going to put this one down. Why don't you do this one? And the one that she picked was, turned out to be what would be my next book with Quirk, which was called Whisper Down the Lane, which was all about the satanic panic. And, you know, it ended up being, I think I had like a year and a half to write that one. So I only like ultimately lost maybe 3 months, if that. Maybe even like 1 or 2 months. Uh, Psychologically speaking, for me, it was definitely a bummer, because it was like I was in the world of Kill Your Darling, and like I was already imagining like the world of like putting this book, like living in this world of this story and putting it together and collaborating editorially and like, making it a thing. So the hardest part for me was pulling out of that and putting myself into the mental headspace of a completely different story. And I was really nervous and a little scared about that, and I had kind of anxiety about that. So, but what actually was, what I remember is that that anxiety actually kind of transferred into the writing of Whisper Down the Lane, and it actually kind of became good kind of fuel for that fire, where I did something that I've never done before and tried to write about something that I never really written about before, and therefore everything kind of felt like there was like an inherent risk within the process of writing Whisper Down the Lane. Um, So it all kind of worked out ultimately in the long run. Um, but yeah, it's just funny how these things kind of happen. Yeah.
Well, thank goodness it wasn't a case of you've got 2 months, we
Yeah.
need a completed manuscript. Because we've heard things like that before, but
Yeah.
I mean, I can kind of see from a commercial point of view and ease of selling something how Whisper Down the Lane is much more a second book,
Yeah.
you know. I mean, Kill Your Darling, it's so ambitious. It is more a kind of, you want to be at least on kind of book 4 or 5. That's
Yeah. Yeah. I I mean, I think Kill Your Darling has come out when it needed to come out. And it's a really kind of small, handcrafted story. And it doesn't have the reach of a lot of the other books that I've been fortunate enough to get out there. But I have to have faith that it's going to find its readers. But it's just long game. It really is just like knowing that, like, if one person says, "Oh my God, you should read this," uh, it'll find people. And I'm just really happy that it exists, because I mean, 10 years, 9 years is a long time for, and enough people said no to be like, oh, okay, I guess not. This one isn't going to do it. But Doug pulled it out of the scrap heap of eternity.
Oh, what a wonderful note for us to begin to wrap up on. So, I mean, where can our listeners and viewers connect with you, particularly with social media being so divided these days? Where is the place? Where is the platform if they want to get in touch with you?
Oh my God. I wish I knew. I mean, I'm doing them all really poorly. I'm still on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Threads. I'm on Facebook. I'm on TikTok. And but I'm one of those, I post and I jump. I don't scroll. I don't exist there. I just put it and then bounce. So I'm just there. I'm doing them all poorly. Find me anywhere, folks.
You show up to the party, you put your face in, hey guys, and then you go down the street to the next party.
I mean, I kind of do, which is awful, but yeah, there you go.
I think it's what a lot of us are doing because, attention is so fragmented at the moment. And I've found for myself, just as you think one of the platforms is the one where you're getting the most engagement, then suddenly it becomes crickets and another
Yeah.
platform is where people are responding. And d- nobody's quite found their way. There's not a consensus.
So, yeah. And I think that's actually just the way it's going to be. I think it's all going to fragment and fracture. So, some people are over here and some people are over there. And it's do you go to all of them, or do you just hop onto one island?
It is the ultimate dilemma. There is no answer, and we're
Yeah.
all out of time. So, do you have any final thoughts to leave everyone with?
Oh my God. First off, thank you to both of you for, bringing me back. It's always, I don't know, there's always this moment of trepidation where you guys, being on This Is Horror is I feel there's certain kind of podcasts and interviews that you really want to bring your A game to, because that it it matters in this way that is oh God, I just want to make sure I don't shit the bed. But so thank you. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about all the writers, but we're all just navigating, right? We're just trying to figure this out. I don't think anyone has the answer. I defy Paul Tremblay to give us his answer. What is the answer, Paul, if you're listening?
There you go. It's over to Paul.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys.